Hi, welcome to the tutorial for the rose cake pop for Valentine's Day. You're going to need cake pop material and you're going to roll them, starting out rolling them into balls, and then we're going to put them into that cone shape that you use for flowers. You're also going to need some popsicle sticks. These are the paper ones that I've painted green with food coloring and a little bit of vodka. And so I'm showing you here, that's just a few drops of, I used an airbrush color and a little bit of vodka. And then I'm just gently dipping a little bit with a clean brush and just brushing that color onto the cake pop stick. And with the vodka and the paper, it's going to absorb and then evaporate, so you won't have to worry about the color coming off on anyone's hands. But those are going to be the stem for our rose cake pop. So that is just going to get put aside to dry. It doesn't take very long. I have a little fan that I put in front of the cake pop stick. It dries pretty quickly. Now I'm using red modeling chocolate or candy clay instead of fondant. I'm going to use a heart-shaped cutter so I can cut petals out quicker. You'll see that shortly. And for your petals, you're actually going to use a foam pad and a ball tool to kind of thin out the edges of the petals and give them that little signature ruffle. And then we're going to finish off the bottom of the cake pop with some green candy clay, and I've got a little plunger leaf cutter that will give some texture to it as well. So first step, once your cake pops are rolled into balls, then you're just going to take it between your palms and just gently roll into that cone shape, almost like kind of a giant Hershey Kiss shape, and that's going to be the base for the cake pop. And then I've got some red candy melts with a little bit of coconut oil melted in to kind of smooth it out a little bit. I find that some of the colored candy melts don't melt as smoothly, so I do like to add a little coconut oil or another oil to kind of help thin it out. So I'm just dipping the end of the cake pop stick into the melted chocolate, and then I'm just going to gently twist and push that into the cake pop base. This is going to help the cake pop stick kind of glue the cake pop onto it so that when you're dipping it, it doesn't fall off into your melted candy melts, which is super annoying. I've had that happen before. So that's just going to get set aside to dry and chill. And now I chill my cake pops in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes before I dip them, just so that they have a nice chill. And you can see that little glue of chocolate is nice and solid. And I'm just using a little jelly jar. It seems to be a really good size and shape for dipping cake pops of almost all shapes and sizes. And then I'm just dipping it and then kind of shaking off the excess. I'm not too worried about having this be perfectly smooth because we're going to be covering it with the modeling chocolate or candy clay petals anyway. So if I were doing a cake pop that wasn't going to be covered in something like that, I would definitely take a little more time to make it smooth. So once the cake pops are dipped and drying, the next step is to take your red modeling chocolate, and I'm just working it a little bit with my clean hands to warm it up, get it pliable, make it nice and smooth. And then I'm just going to roll this out on, I have a silicone food mat that helps so it doesn't stick to the surface, and just a small roller. And I'm just going to roll pretty thin because you're going to put technically 3 layers of petals on the cake pop. I like to roll it pretty thin. And I'm using modeling chocolate instead of fondant because I feel like it's a little more pleasing to bite into a bunch of modeling chocolate than it is a big ball of fondant. So, but again, if you roll it thin, it won't be, as much chewiness when the customer bites into it. But I'm using a heart cutter. If you have a petal cutter for a rose, a petal cutter set, you could certainly do that. I just honestly, I couldn't find my rose petal set and I was ready to do this demo. So I was like, all right, well, we're just going to roll with it. So I decided, since it's a Valentine's Day video, that I would just go ahead and use a heart cutter, and then I can cut the hearts in half, and that gives me basically a rose petal shape. So I've got my mat, which is just a foam mat that you'd use for gum paste flowers or other flowers. And I'm going to just place the petals on there. And since I used a heart cutter, I've got kind of a little point on some of the edges you can see, but I'm going to smooth it out with the ball tool. It's not as easy to use a ball tool on modeling chocolate. As you can see, it's kind of sticking a little bit in spots, but I'm not looking for absolute perfection here. I just want to give it a little smoothing on the edges, give it a little ruffle, give it the little cup shape. Have a couple that I did before I shot the video so you can kind of see. They turn out pretty well. I do have a little bit of cornstarch I noticed later on my foam mat, so there's a little bit of a white powdery hue to the back of the petals, but once we put them on the cake pop, it's you're not really going to see that too much, and you can always use the warmth of your hand to kind of smooth and kind of pinch them into shape and try to get rid of some of that cornstarch. But just making sure all my petals are shaped before I start putting them on the cake pop. So this cake pop's been dipped in the chocolate, or the melted candy melts, and it is dry. So your first petal is just going to be a single petal that's going to be the very top of the center. And I'm not moistening these with anything. Modeling chocolate sticks to chocolate really well just on its own. So by just gently pressing it on, it seems to be adhering just fine. If you needed to moisten it, you could, or if you were using fondant or another medium, you would need to moisten it to make it stick. But so our center petal gets curled around, and then now you're starting with the first row, which is going to be 3 petals. And I've put that first petal where the corners of the center petal meet, and then you're just going to start overlapping slightly. And one thing that I learned when doing roses, they look a little more realistic if you make sure that the height of the petals is all the same. So if that makes sense, you see how each petal that I put on is right about the same height across the top. So that's your first row of 3 petals, and it's really starting to come together. Now the next row is going to be placed at the intersection of 2 of the petals from the previous row. And again, you see that I'm attaching that petal so that the top is about even with the other row. And then you're just going to continue on just like we did with the 3 petals, just slightly overlapping. And this second row is going to have, I believe, 5 petals is what it ended up to be. Usually it'll be an odd number when you're working on a rose like this. And I believe that's almost the last one for this row. And again, I'm just gently pushing it in with my fingers, and as it attaches, then I can fold down the tops a little bit. So now With the very last row of petals, we want them to be a little bit bigger because we want to cover the bottom of the cake pop. So what I did was I took the next size up of my heart cutter. And again, if you're using a petal set, you would just use the next petal up. But I'm going to do another row of 5 petals, but these are going to be bigger. So I'm just cutting 2.5 hearts because I only need 5. And then I'll just take my X-Acto knife and cut the larger hearts in half. So I've got 2 and now 4 and my last petal 5. And then exact same process that we did where we're going to put them on the foam mat and shape them. But I just want to show, do you see how it's bigger and longer? Because we want it to cover the bottom of that rose, so you don't see the other layers overlapping. So I just, same thing, shaped them just like I did the others. And then once they're all shaped, now I'm ready to go ahead and put my last row on. And like the others, each petal, the first one is going to go at the intersection of 2 prior row petals. But because I've made a larger petal, this is now going all the way to the bottom of the base of the rose. So you don't see all of those other petals, kind of the edges of them that aren't super clean. So same thing, just slightly overlapping with my larger petals. The height is matching up to the top, and got the last petal on. Again, you can see a little bit of that white powdery from my cornstarch on my foam pad. I would brush that off before doing another one, but that's it for the petals. And so now, just to finish off the very bottom, all we're going to do is roll out the green candy clay and use the little leaf cutter. If you don't have a leaf cutter, you can cut, you can do the heart-shaped trick and cut them in half and then just kind of form them to make them look like leaves. I just happen to have these little plunger cutters, and they're really cool because not only do they cut, but when you push it down onto the modeling chocolate, it'll give a little leaf vein design. So you push down to cut, then the second step is to push the center plunger down, and then you push it up to pop your piece out, and now you've got a leaf that's cut and already veined. So pretty cool. I have lots of different sets of these kind of plunger cutters. So I think I cut 5 total. I might have needed a few more, I don't remember, but same process. Now I'm just gonna gently work them onto the bottom. Now my leaf that I cut, it's only veined on one side. So what I did was I'm attaching it so that the veined part is more visible. And that's kind of why I'm folding them down a little bit, because most likely your customers are going to be looking at the kind of from the top down, because they'll be admiring your beautiful rose. So you can get leaf veiners that are double-sided if you wanted both sides. So I'm just finishing up putting the last little bits of the leaves on and the stems green, and voila, your cake pop rose is done.